Hey, it's djcaseuk back with another video on Acid Pro. In this video I'm going to be showing you the 5 main things that I use Acid Pro for and where it particularly stands out on certain tasks, and I'll do other videos comparing DAWs in more detail and showing tips and tricks, so be sure to subscribe for more music tech videos. With that being said, let's get into this video, 5 reasons that you should use Acid Pro. So number 1, arranging loops, tracks and editing. When Acid Pro was first released in 1998, by Sonic Foundry, that was about 4 months after the launch of FL Studio, which at the time was called Fruity Loops, and it was marketed as being the ultimate loop-based software. So Acid Pro's primary function is that you can drag and drop loops into Acid Pro and then start arranging them into tracks. It will automatically beat match them for you if they've been chopped into loops, and you could get loops from Acid Planet website, sample packs, or loops that you've made yourself and edited in SoundForge, which is a sister software for Acid Pro. Or you could use Fruity Loops, if you could afford to buy that as well, to make your loops in there and then transfer them into Acid Pro so that you can arrange them much easier than you could in Fruity Loops. Because in Fruity Loops you have to remember what pattern is which in order to draw it on the timeline. So you'd make pattern 1, and then you could draw pattern 1 on the timeline, and then you could select pattern 3 and draw that on the timeline. Acid Pro just made everything easier by allowing you to just drag and drop your loops into the software and start chopping and cutting them however you want. Once you've got your loops and samples that you want to use, you can then start arranging the song very quickly in Acid Pro. And Acid gives you lots of tools for editing loops, being able to cut, copy, paste and split and join the samples very quickly however you want, without having to remember which pattern is which in order to draw it on the timeline. You can see here with the Acid Pro Sonic Foundry manual, when it was first released, there's quite a lot of different ways that you can manipulate and edit your loops. So they've comes with this huge manual showing you all the different things that you can do, and if you subscribe to my channel I'll show you more things that Acid Pro can do in my videos. Compared to other DAWs, Acid Pro has really streamlined the editing process. The tools that you have to do that and the shortcut keys just make everything very quick and simple to do. And you can see here in the time that I've explained this, I've already drawn out a track. So number 1, editing your tracks. So number 2 then would be beat matching for DJ sets or beat matching samples to use in Acid Pro. When Sony took over Acid Pro, they brought out Acid Pro 4, another big manual, and what the beat mapper allows you to do is take any audio and map the beats to a grid. This means that you can get absolutely beat perfect music or finished audio, songs or samples that you want to use in your project. Simply drag and drop them into Acid Pro, use the beat wizard to sync your beats, and this feature's mostly been used to make DJ sets inside Acid Pro, but as well as doing that you could also beat map any sample that you might want to use inside your project. And you can see in the time that I've explained this how quick and easy it is to beat map a sample or a track, and then you can start using that inside your Acid Pro project. So my number 2 would be beat matching samples and audio files, and that came out with the release of Acid Pro 4. So number 2, beat matching samples and tracks. So number 3, I would say making sample packs and loops. With the next update, Sony Acid Pro 5, they allowed you to have MIDI tracks and add VST instruments into your project and then write your own MIDI inside Acid Pro. So this meant that you could create your own sounds and write your own music. So there was another huge manual when they updated Acid Pro with MIDI. And the reason why this was a particularly good update is because it meant that you no longer had to use Fruity Loops to open VST instruments and make sounds. and create loops. You could just do everything inside Acid Pro. And that meant that the workflow became a lot easier because Acid Pro is much quicker to just add tracks and start drawing them in, as opposed to having to remember which loop is which before you can draw it on the timeline, which is, I think, one of the major disadvantages with Fruity Loops, having to remember which pattern's which and then select that pattern in order to draw it on the timeline. It was also a decade later that FL Studio allowed you to duplicate tracks. The reason you might want to do that is because you've made a bass line and you want to layer it with something else, so you would duplicate the track and then have the layers playing different sounds, so you get a layered kind of effect. And Acid Pro 7 was already able to do that, and it was about a decade later that was added to FL Studio. I think it was FL Studio 20 that they added that. Acid Pro, you just add a track and start drawing it in, which really speeds up the workflow. So number 3, making sounds and sample packs and loops inside Acid Pro, and that came with the update in Acid Pro 5. So number 4, I would say writing music. In Acid Pro 7, there was another big update which gives you tools for music theory. So what they did is added a full orchestra. Sony added a full orchestra which they've used to make movie soundtracks, and that includes 7 drum kits and an entire orchestra of instruments. However, a lot of people left Acid Pro after Acid Pro 6 because when 6 came out it was full of bugs and it didn't really offer anything new apart from lots of new effects and plugins, but most of them used to crash, and they were used for mixing and mastering. But in Acid Pro 7 they took out all the bugs and they added tools for music theory. So what that does is it gives you, on the piano roll, if you want to call it that, or the MIDI sequencer, the part where you draw and write your MIDI, it gives you a tool so that you can see what scale of music you want. So if you want to write music in the scale of C or D, you just select which scale you want to use, and it will highlight which notes you can press that are in that scale. So if you're not very good at music theory, this would allow you to then see exactly what notes you can press in order to write perfectly good music in the right scale. And this was introduced in Acid Pro 7. It was a decade later that CUBASE decided to add tools for writing music in key. They gave you tools for scales and music theory, but Acid Pro was well ahead of the game with that. And yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons why Acid Pro's always stood out for me. So you can write whatever scale of music you want and it shows you where you need to put your notes. So my number 4 would be writing music inside Acid Pro, and of course you've got the orchestra that was added as well, and that orchestra has been used to write soundtracks for movies, so it's more than good enough. It's got 7 drum kits plus every instrument you can think of inside the orchestra. So number 4, writing music, tools for music theory. So number 5 then would be mixing and mastering. This was added in Acid Pro 6, but it was quite buggy, and then in Acid Pro 7 all the bugs were taken out, and it gives you lots of tools that you need for mixing and mastering. So you've got things like compressors, different types of EQs, and everything you need to master your audio. And this is why I think Acid Pro for me is the best all-round software, because it just gives you everything that you need to arrange your track, create your loops, write your music, and then you've got all the tools as well for mixing and mastering as well. You can add third-party plugins to it if you want. So that's the 5 things that I use Acid Pro for. Hope you found this video useful. Subscribe for the next video, and thanks for watching. See you on the next video.